Rain hit the dirt like falling needles. The sky above the mountain valley was filled with black smoke. Explosions echoed in the distance. Burnt trees stood like broken bones sticking out from the muddy ground. It was the kind of place where no one wanted to be, but John was there. And so was his dog, Bear. John was a retired scout from the Human Defense Unit. After the last battle ended 6 months ago, he left everything and moved to this quiet, ruined valley to live a peaceful life. The war was supposed to be over. The enemy, an alien species called the Drek, had signed the treaty. Both sides agreed. No more fighting. No more blood. But John never trusted peace that came too fast. He had seen too much. Betrayal, false promises, secret attacks. So even here, far from the cities, he still carried a weapon on his hip. He built fences around his land, fixed solar shields, and kept his rifle ready. And he never went anywhere without Bear, his loyal old dog. That morning, something felt wrong. John had just finished checking the solar panels when Bear started barking. It wasn't normal barking. It was sharp, fast like an alarm. John dropped the tool from his hand and grabbed the rifle. His boots sank into the wet mud as he ran toward the noise. Bear stood near the edge of the broken fence, growling low. His fur was wet and bristled. John raised his rifle and moved closer, heart pounding. He expected a wild animal, or maybe one of those strange machines the Drek used for spying. But what he saw made him freeze. Lying in the mud, just beyond the tree line, was a Drek soldier. She was bleeding badly. Her left leg was twisted, possibly broken. Her armor was cracked open at the side, dark purple blood oozing into the ground. Her helmet was gone, revealing her alien features: pale blue skin, long tendrils like hair, and sharp black eyes that were half shut. Bear whined softly now. The growl was gone. He tilted his head and took a step forward. John didn't move. Why? Would a Drek be here? Why alone? Why wounded? He slowly walked around her body, rifle still raised. She wasn't carrying any weapon. No energy blade, no plasma pistol. Her gear was damaged and her breathing was shaky. She looked like she had been trying to crawl, but her arm gave out. She tried to speak. A rough sound came from her throat. John couldn't understand the language, but the fear in her voice was clear. She wasn't trying to fight. She was begging. John's first instinct was to finish it. She was the enemy. The same species that had burned down his squad during the second wave on Jupiter Colony. The same species that tricked human diplomats, then attacked mining ships in secret. Her people had caused too much death, but Bear sat down next to her. Just sat there, quiet. Still. John looked down at the Drek again. He expected hate to rise in his chest. But instead, something else came. A question. Why was she here, alone, injured, and unarmed? He lowered the rifle. You move, he warned. I shoot. She didn't understand his words, but she saw the weapon drop. Her chest lifted slightly, relief, or maybe just air returning to her lungs. John grabbed an old hover tarp from his shed and carefully dragged her body onto it. He tied the handles and began pulling her toward his outpost. Bear walked beside him the whole way, glancing back at the alien now and then like he was protecting her. Inside the outpost, John placed her on the table. He had no medical scanner, just basic field supplies and an old translation device he used back in his army days. He clipped it to her armor. Speak, he said. It took a moment. Static crackled, and then a soft, broken voice came out. I was left. My ship crashed. My own left me. John stared at her. The voice was weak, the words broken, but clear enough. She wasn't part of any attack. She was abandoned. Or worse, betrayed by her own. Why were you here? He asked. She looked at him, her black eyes blinking slowly. Then she said something strange. Warning, you war not over. John stepped back. The words hit like thunder in his chest. What do you mean? She tried to speak more, but coughed up blood. And collapsed again. Bear barked once loud, sharp. Like he knew something bad was coming. John looked out the window, and in that moment, he realized something terrifying. This wasn't a random crash. This was a message, and he was the only human who had received it. Asterisk. The sky turned darker by evening. Thunder rolled low across the valley, but it wasn't the weather that made John uneasy. It was her, the Drek. She lay unconscious on his table, her breathing shallow. Her strange purple blood stained the bandages John had wrapped around her. She shouldn't be alive. And she definitely shouldn't be in his home. But Bear kept sitting close to her, head low, ears alert, like the old dog knew something. John didn single quotes T. John sat in the corner, his hand on his rifle, staring at the Drek's cracked armor. It had strange symbols on it like warning signs or mission codes, but the translation device only worked when she spoke. Symbols stayed silent. John's gut twisted. Something was coming. Something worse than before. He tapped his wrist. Come. Open in a secure line to an old army contact. The signal was weak, but after a few seconds, a face appeared, grizzled, tired and surprised. John? Thought you vanished after the ceasefire. I did. I've got something. Someone. A Drek. Soldier. Crashed near my valley. The face on the screen blinked. Alive? Yes, the officer leaned in. Shoot it. You know protocol. She warned me. Warned you? About what? That the war's not over. Silence. Then the man said, John, there's chatter. Something's happening out in Sector 9. Disappearances. Lost patrols. But command says it's local raiders. They're wrong, aren't they? John nodded slowly. Send a probe drone to my location. Quiet. No full response teams. On it. Stay alive, old dog. The screen blinked off. John stood and moved closer. To the Drek woman. Her body twitched slightly. He knelt beside her and tapped the translator again. What's your name? No answer. She was still too weak. John sighed and began cleaning the wound again. The tissue was different from human skin, like soft armor and smooth rubber mixed together. She had several scars, some old, some new. Not the kind from one crash. These were signs of betrayal, of being hunted by her own kind. Bear whined. Then, suddenly, the Drek's hand grabbed John's wrist. Her eyes opened. Too late, she whispered. John froze. Too late for what? She tried to sit up, trembling. They come. Not Drek. Not full blood. Mutants. John's mind raced. What do you mean, hybrids? She nodded, lips dry. They splice us. Change us, no orders, no law. Then, she turned her eyes to him. I was to warn you. But they found me. Shot my ship. My own kind. Fear them. John stepped back, thoughts spinning. You were trying to defect, warn humanity. She didn't respond. Just closed her eyes again. John walked to the window and looked out. The valley was quiet. Too quiet. Even the wind had stopped. That night, John didn't sleep. He locked all the doors, loaded extra plasma rounds into his rifle, and set motion. Sensors outside the fence. He placed a stun pistol beside the Drek's table, within her reach, but with the safety locked. Just in case you're lying, he whispered, but Bear never growled again. He stayed next to her, like he was protecting her from more than just humans. Just before dawn, the sensors beeped. John's eyes snapped open. He rushed to the screen. Movement. 4 heat signatures. Not animals. Not normal. He grabbed his rifle. Stay down, he said to the Drek. If you can walk, hide. She blinked, then slid off the table, legs shaky. But she managed to crawl behind the heavy crate near the furnace. John stepped outside. Mist covered the ground. Shapes moved in the fog. He raised the rifle and aimed. The shapes got closer. Too fast, too quiet. Then one stepped into view. It was part Drek, part something else. Its skin was pale gray. The eyes were wrong wide and glowing. Its mouth was full of teeth, more than a Drek should have. Its armor looked half melted into. Its body, as if grown instead of worn. It didn't speak. It just charged. John fired. Plasma lit up the mist. The thing dropped, shrieking in a voice that didn't belong to any living creature. But 3 more came out of the fog. Bear barked furiously from the doorway. John backed up, taking aim again. Suddenly behind him, he heard the Drek woman's voice, calmer now, stronger. Shoot the one in the middle. It controls the others. John adjusted his aim, fired, and hit it clean in the chest. The other 2 collapsed like puppets with cut strings. John stood breathing hard. The mist slowly clearing. Then he turned to her. Who are you really? She looked up at him, face pale, blood still leaking from her bandage. My name is Kelry. I was a Drek medic. Now I am nothing. But I know this. They're coming in large numbers. And they don't care about peace. John stared at her. Rifle still smoking. Something told him this valley would never be peaceful again, and now, he wasn't sure who the real enemy was anymore. Smoke from the burned bodies still hung in the air. The strange hybrids John had killed didn't bleed like Drek. Their blood was dark green, thick like oil. Their armor didn't fall apart when they died. It cracked like dried skin, almost alive. He had fought many things during the war, but nothing like them. Kelry, if that was truly her name, stood beside the doorway now, leaning against the wall. She had taken one of John's old jackets, and though it hung off her thin frame, it helped cover the signs of her injuries. Her face looked calmer, but her eyes stayed sharp, watching every corner of the valley like something worse was on its way. You knew they'd come here, John said quietly, loading fresh rounds into his rifle. Why? Kelry lowered her eyes. Because this valley was once a drop zone for hidden supply pods. Old Drek tech, long buried. And they want it? They already have some of it, she said. But this place, this is the last piece. They need. John clenched his jaw. And you just happened to crash here? I didn't crash, she whispered. I was shot down. My own commanders knew I had defected. They tried to silence me before I could reach humans. John looked toward the woods again. His fingers tightened around the gun. His instincts screamed that this wasn't just about war. This was something deeper. Something that had been buried. Under silence, he opened his cum again and called the same contact from before. Command still thinks I'm crazy. The gruff voice answered. They won't listen. Then send someone who will, John growled. The officer paused then. Syed, I'll try. There's a young field scout team nearby. Not military, but ex-spec ops. I'll tell them you need eyes, not orders. Fine, and hurry. He shut the cum off. Kelry stepped forward. You still trust your kind? I don't trust anyone. John muttered. But I trust that someone else might shoot straighter than me when the next wave shows up. That night, Kelry spoke more. Her voice still weak, but her words sharper. She explained how the Drek Command had lost control of a secret, Project Mutant soldiers created by fusing their DNA with things they found on dead planets, organics and machines. Half alive, half programmed, no loyalty, no soul, they were. Made to win the war at any cost, she said. But they learned too fast, grew smarter than their masters. Now they move without orders. They harvest Drek and human alike. John sat in silence. Bear rested near Kelry's feet, not growling, not afraid. Almost like he had already accepted her. Just before dawn, the motion sensors beeped again, but this time, no enemies. A small vehicle approached camouflaged, no lights, no noise. John raised his rifle until he saw the human emblem on the side. 2 people stepped out. A man and a woman, both armed, both moving with military training. The woman stepped forward first. We were told you had alien contact. John pointed to Kelry. There she is, but you'll want to hear what she knows. The two looked at Kelry carefully. The man frowned. This isn't protocol. Neither is getting ripped apart. My mutant soldiers, John snapped. Kelry stood up straight. If you wait, they'll surround you. They come fast. They smell human weapons. They smell blood. The two scouts exchanged a look, then the woman nodded. We'll listen. Inside John's outpost, Kelry drew a rough map using old datapads in her own memory. She marked valleys, caves, old Drek burial zones, places where secret pods had been hidden years ago, far from any official warfront. The hybrids dig into the old wrecks, she said. They feed on tech, they turn pieces into weapons, into armor. And when they gather enough, they multiply. The male scout swore under his breath. John pointed to the map. So this valley is a last holdout, Kelry nodded. There's a command beacon here, buried under the cliffs. If they find it, they can control all old Drek systems, even the ones orbiting planets, like auto-defense satellites. The scout asked, yes, or worse. The woman stood. We need to destroy it. John shook his head. No, we need to reach it first. Secure it, learn from it. The male scout frowned. You want to keep Drek tech? I want to understand it. John snapped. Before they do, we don't win by guessing anymore. We win by knowing. Silence followed. Then Kelry spoke again. They move at night. They don't fear darkness. They are darkness. You must be ready. Or no one will. Leave this valley alive. Outside, the clouds gathered. Lightning flashed across the sky. And somewhere deep in the trees, something moved. A low sound, half growl, half static, rose from the earth. John raised his rifle again. Because the real war hadn't ended. It was just hiding, waiting. Under their feet all along. Asterisk wind howled through the trees like a ghost in pain. The air smelled like damp metal and burning leaves. John stood by the edge of the cliff with his rifle pressed tight against his shoulder, scanning the woods below. The scout team was already preparing the ground entrance, setting sensors and auto turrets. Kelry, the Drek medic, stayed quiet. Inside, sitting with Bear at her feet and a map in her hands, John's mind spun in every direction. He wasn't just guarding the wounded enemy anymore. He was standing at the center of something no one wanted to believe, something twisted, hidden. Under both Drek and human lies, the male scout Torres walked up behind John. The underground path is sealed, he said. Collapsed years ago, probably by Drek engineers trying to bury their mistake. John didn't answer. We'll have to go through the main hatch on the cliffside. Kelry said it was a Drek maintenance port. She thinks it might still open. With her code. She thinks? John muttered. Would you rather trust command? Torres said, half-smiling. John lowered the scope and turned toward the bunker. Inside, Kelry stared at the cracked tablet screen like it held the fate of both species. Her hand moved slowly, writing code, drawing connections, calculating something no one else in the room could even begin to understand. The female scout, Diaz, whispered to John as they entered. She's not like the others, is she? John shook his head. She's something else. Kelry looked up. The hybrids, they're not just alive, they learn. Every time you shoot one, the next group avoids that mistake. They pass memory, like insects, like machines. But they're neither. Are you saying they evolve after every fight? Torres asked, frowning. Kelry nodded. Faster than us. Diaz's eyes narrowed. Then we don't have time. Kelry, press the tablet once more. The hatch will respond to my DNA, but if they find it before we do, they'll rewrite the beacon. They'll use it to launch every forgotten drone, every dead satellite weapon still in orbit. John stepped closer. How long do we have? Kelry looked outside. One night, maybe less. That night, the wind didn't stop, the mist returned, and the sounds. We're wrong. John stood watch while Diaz and Torres reinforced the outer wall. Calry stayed near the back, checking weapons and watching the sensors. Bear didn't bark this time, he just growled low, staring into the dark trees. Then the sensors screamed out movement. Fast. Many. Coming from all directions. John yelled, "Get down!" Laser fire lit up the forest. Shadows moved in jerks, too fast for normal limbs. The hybrids were no longer crawling like beasts. Now they ran upright, jumped between trees, moved in packs coordinated like trained soldiers. Torres shouted from the right side, "They've adapted! They're flanking!" Calry ran to the edge, holding a glowing device. "I can slow them." The beacon pulse, it's still tied to the ground here. She threw the device into the soil. It hummed and released a wave of invisible pressure. First wave of hybrids froze, then screamed in rage. Their metal-veined skin shook. Some cracked apart like rotten fruit. Others melted where they stood, but not all. Some stronger ones kept coming. John and Torres kept firing. Diaz covered Calry with stun blasts. Bear darted through the smoke, biting at limbs and dragging stunned hybrids away from the bunker. Then one of the hybrids made it to the wall. It slammed into the metal with inhuman force. Cracks appeared. John turned, raised his rifle, but too late. The wall burst inward. Calry was thrown back. Diaz covered her with her body, but a flying shard hit her shoulder. Torres tackled the hybrid and slammed a knife into its neck, but it didn't bleed. It screeched, then exploded in a burst of smoke and sparks. Suicide units. Calry gasped, crawling toward the table. John helped her up. "We're running out of time." "I can open the hatch now," she said, shaking. "But you'll have to guard it. Once the beacon link is broken, they'll come in numbers we can't stop." John looked at Diaz and Torres. Both were bleeding, tired, but still standing. He nodded once. "Then we go now." Calry moved to the edge of the cliff. She pulled back her sleeve and pressed her hand into a scanner hidden in the stone. A soft sound came from beneath the ground. The stone shifted. The hatch began to open. Steam rose, and inside was not darkness, but light. Rows of glowing symbols lit the stairs leading down, blue, white, and pulsing like a heartbeat. Calry whispered, "It's still alive down there. The beacon? It's waiting." John looked down the passage. He didn't know if they were walking into a weapon or a last chance to stop the real war. Either way, they had no choice. They had to descend, and they had to do it before the hybrids found a way in. The stairs beneath the hatch were cold, wet, and glowing with a soft pulse that made John's skin crawl. It didn't feel like walking into a bunker. It felt like stepping into a living creature's throat. The walls were smooth, breathing slightly organic metal, some kind of Drek-grown structure. Calry moved ahead of the group, her hand tracing symbols as they glowed under her touch. Behind them, Bear growled low. His ears twitched. The hybrid army was still up there, swarming around the outpost, waiting. John had sealed the hatch behind them to slow them down. But he knew that wouldn't stop them for long. Diaz was pale. Blood soaked through her shoulder armor. Torres kept her steady as they walked, his free hand gripping a small bomb trigger. If things went bad, he planned to take as many of those freaks with him as possible. "How deep is this?" John asked Calry, his voice echoing in the narrow tunnel. "Almost to the valley core," she answered. "Where the Drek planted the beacon tower. It's not a satellite. It's rooted in the ground. Like a tree, alive, but dying." John's grip tightened on his rifle. "And what happens if it dies?" Calry's eyes didn't blink. "The hybrids take its place. They grow their own roots. They send signals. Not to ships, but to minds." John stopped. "Mind control?" "Not in the way you think," Calry whispered. "They don't speak with words. They send instincts. Rage, hunger, chaos, like turning 1,000 beings into one will. Torres spat. Hive behavior. We've seen that in insect species, but not like this. John looked around. No one ever thought to destroy this before? Cowrie looked at him then. Some tried. They disappeared. Others saw profit, power. But they didn't understand what they were touching. They reached a door huge, curved, with symbols circling it like a lock. Cowrie placed her palm flat against the center. The metal rippled and opened like a flower, revealing a chamber lit with slow, glowing pulses. The walls were covered in veins wires, maybe, but they pulsed like blood vessels. And in the center stood the beacon. It was tall, shaped like a spire, but it bent slightly toward them, like it sensed their arrival. It hummed softly, whispering, in a language that wasn't sound, more like a feeling. Diaz stepped back. It's inside my head. Torres clenched his fists. Feels like drowning while awake. John didn't move. What now? Cowrie approached the beacon slowly. I can give it a final command. I can shut it down from here. But if I do, they'll know. Every hybrid will feel it. They'll rush this place like a wave. John looked toward the tunnel. Then we hold them here. Cowrie touched the base of the beacon. It responded to her instantly, opening like petals. Tiny lights floated up from inside memories, fragments of war. Images of old battles, screams, names of soldiers long dead. Human and Drek, John saw. Himself and one of the Flash's years younger, bleeding on a battlefield. A Drek standing over him, then falling dead. The memory wasn't his, but the beacon remembered him. It watches everything, John whispered. Cowrie was trembling. I can't shut it down completely, but I can burn its roots. Cut it off from the surface, it will lose its signal. The hybrids won't hear it anymore. Do it, John said. She pressed her fingers into the central light. The chamber darkened. Above them. They heard the hatch burst open. The sound echoed down like thunder. John raised his rifle. Torres took his position by the door. Diaz dropped to her knees behind cover, blood dripping from her arm. Bear stood beside John, growling again. Cowrie whispered something in Drek tongue. Beacon screamed, not in sound but in energy. The walls shook. Light pulsed wildly. Sparks flew from the ceiling. The smell of burning air filled the chamber. Then silence. Cowrie collapsed. John caught her just before she hit the floor. Did it work? He asked. She opened her eyes. They're deaf now. But they're angry. From up the tunnel, in the darkness, they heard it hundreds of feet, claws, and metal limbs scraping stone. Torres looked at John. We can't hold them. John reached into his belt, pulled a small case, and handed it to him. Take Cowrie and Diaz. There's a side tunnel behind that wall. Blast it open. It leads to the old canyon stream. It's your only way out. Torres blinked. What about you? I'll stay here with Bear. Someone has to hold them back. Diaz shook her head weakly. You'll die. John looked up the JAMA. Tunnel. I already did, years ago. As Torres activated the wall charge, John gave Cowrie one last look. Whatever you are now, keep fighting. Not for me, for everyone else. The charge blew the side tunnel open. Dust filled the air. Torres dragged Diaz. Cowrie followed with a limp. John and Bear turned to face the tunnel and waited. The tunnel shook with the sound of claws scraping stone, metal limbs dragging along the walls, and voices, if they could even be called that, whispering like static. John stood in front of the beacon chamber, his rifle raised and his back straight. Beside him, Bear crouched low, growling, ready to lunge. John knew he wouldn't survive long. He had maybe a few minutes then at best to delay the swarm. That was enough time for Cowrie, Diaz, and Torres to escape through the side tunnel. He told himself that was all that mattered. Then, the first hybrid appeared in the darkness. Its eyes glowed like white fire, and its body twitched unnaturally as it crawled across the walls and ceiling, fused armor plates shifting like scales. It opened its mouth wide, too wide, and let out a sound that was both a screech and a digital scream. John fired. The plasma bolt hit its chest, sending it flying backward. But more came. Dozens. They poured from the tunnel like liquid metal. Crawling, running, climbing. Some had weapons grafted into their arms. Some had multiple heads, mouths twitching open in mindless hunger. John shot again and again. His rifle hummed, overheating. Bear leaped at the nearest one and tore into its arm. It didn't scream, it just kept moving. John kicked it down, then spun and shot another at close range. He gritted his teeth. Come on then. You want this. Beacon, you crawl through me. And they tried. But even in the middle of the chaos, he noticed something. Some of the hybrids were confused. Their movements were slower, less direct. Their attacks didn't match. They stumbled, like they couldn't hear the same voice anymore. Kelry was right. The beacon signal had been cut, but rage had replaced orders. And rage was harder to stop. One of the hybrids slammed into John, knocking him back. His rifle flew from his hands. Bear jumped in and bit the creature's throat, but it didn't fall. It slammed Bear into the ground and raised a blade hand. John grabbed a pipe and drove it into the thing's neck. Sparks burst from its chest as it twitched violently and dropped. John rushed to Bear, who whimpered, leg bleeding. Stay, boy. Stay with me, John whispered, pressing his hand on the wound. Then another sound filled the tunnel, this time from the side passage. Boom. Boom. John looked up sharply. Someone was coming back. From the dust and smoke, Kelry reappeared. Her face was pale, her shoulder burned, but she held a Drek weapon, something long and glowing, humming with alien energy. It didn't look like a gun. It looked like a part of her body now. I told you to run. John shouted. She fired. The weapon sent out a beam of blue light that tore through 3 hybrids in a single line. They shattered, their bodies cracking, open like dry bark. I didn't come here to run, Kelry said, stepping forward. More hybrids crawled out of the tunnel, screeching. Torres appeared next, dragging the grenade launcher. We left Diaz in the canyon safe. But we're not leaving. You. John stood up, gripping a fresh rifle from the ground. You're both idiots, Kelry smiled weakly. So are you. They fought side by side. Human and Drek. The beacon chamber glowed behind them, pulsing slower now, dimmer, like it was shutting down. But even with its voice gone, the hybrids didn't stop. They wanted destruction. They were chaos without a master. Torres fired explosives, blowing apart groups of them. Kelry used the alien beam like a blade, slicing through flesh and metal. John, covered in blood and dirt, shot until his fingers went numb. But they were losing ground. There were just too many. Suddenly Kelry shouted, "The beacon has a final pulse. A reset wave. If we overload it, it will send out a burst strong. Enough to fry anything still linked to its system." Torres frowned. "Will it kill us too?" Kelry paused. "Maybe." John stared at her. "Do it." She ran to the beacon, placed both hands on its core, and began chanting in Drek. Lights flared. The ground trembled. Sparks flew. Torres and John stood over Bear, shielding him as hybrids charged one last time. Kelry screamed, and the beacon exploded with light. A shockwave of raw energy burst from the floor and rushed through the walls, echoing like thunder inside the tunnels. The hybrids froze mid-step, twitching, then collapsed one after another, their bodies lifeless. Silence returned. The air was thick with smoke and burnt oil. Kelry collapsed at the base of the beacon. John rushed to her, grabbed her shoulders. She was breathing. Barely. Torres stood in the doorway, smoke rising from his clothes. "Are we alive?" he asked, coughing. John looked around. No more movement. No more whispers. Only ruins. He looked down at Kelry. "We ended their control. But did we stop the war? She opened her eyes. No, she whispered. But we just gave humanity a chance. The beacon chamber was silent now. Its light had faded. The glowing walls no longer pulsed. What once felt alive now felt like a tomb. The hybrids were scattered across the floor still, broken, no longer twitching, no longer hunting. The signal that gave them one mind had been destroyed, but the cost was clear. Kauri lay at the base of the ruined beacon, her blue skin pale, her breathing shallow. Her hands were burned where she had connected to the core. Smoke curled from her fingers. Her eyes opened slowly, blinking in pain. John sat beside her, wrapping clean cloth around her arms. Bear rested at her feet, wounded but alive. Torres leaned against a wall, both legs cut and bruised, but still clutching his weapon, just in case. John looked at Kauri. You held that thing together. You saved us. She gave a tired nod. Only slowed them. What do you mean? Kauri looked up at the ceiling as if she could see through the stone and soil above them. This nest, this was just one of many. The hybrids? They're not controlled by one beacon. There are others, deep ones. Hidden across worlds, some already active, others waiting. John's jaw tightened. And the one we just shut down? It was their first. Their birthplace. It linked the others. Without it, they're cut off. For now, but they will adapt again. That's what they do. Torres shook his head. So we didn't stop them, just bought time. Kauri nodded. And in war, time is everything. John stood and walked to the edge of the chamber. Rubble blocked the main tunnel now. Only the side escape remained open. Sunlight had begun creeping through the cracks, thin rays finding their way deep underground. Outside, the valley was quiet. No more movement in the trees. No more screeches. But John knew better than to believe it was over. Diaz's voice came through the weak, but alive. This is Diaz. I'm outside the canyon mouth. Signal clear. No hostiles. Do you copy? John grabbed his wrist. We copy. We're alive. Barely. Status of the enemy? Dead, disabled, whatever they were. They're not moving anymore. A long pause, then her voice came back. Then we just won our first real battle. Sending coordinates to command now. They're not going to believe this. Torres let out a bitter laugh. They never do. Kauri tried to sit up. John helped her, gently. She looked at him with tired, heavy eyes. I risked everything to warn humans. Now, what happens to me? John didn't answer at first. He looked at her, this alien who had once been the enemy, now more like a comrade than most humans he knew. You saved lives. That matters. I'll tell them that. They won't care. Then I'll make them care. Kauri's lips curled into the smallest smile. Humans are strange. So are Drek, John replied. But maybe not as different as we thought. They left the chamber together, slowly wounded, leaning on each other. The tunnel opened to daylight, where birds now chirped quietly and the air smelled of wet earth. Instead of burning metal. Diaz met them near the canyon stream, eyes wide in shock. When she saw Kauri walking beside John, you brought her? She asked Torres. Torres nodded. She earned her place. Kauri lowered her eyes, saying nothing. John stepped forward. We send word to command. Let them know we found the origin of the hybrids, and we cut it down. But we also let them know this isn't over. Diaz looked at the wounded group. You think they'll listen now? They will, John said, staring at the sky. Because I'll be loud. He turned to Kauri. You said the other nests are scattered. Do you know where they are? She nodded slowly. I remember a few coordinates. Not all, but enough to start. Good, John said. Because I'm not going back to a peaceful life. Torres chuckled. You were never good at sitting still anyway. John looked down at Bear. The dog wagged his tail slowly and limped beside him. I thought I was done fighting, John said quietly. But maybe this is what I was meant for. Kelly looked up at him, her voice soft. Then let's finish what your kind and mine never could. Together, they walked down the path leading out of the valley. Behind them, the old beacon chamber began to collapse in on itself. Stone and earth buried it forever. The signal was gone. But the war was just beginning, and this time, a human and a Drek would stand side by side, because survival didn't care about species, only courage, only choice. And one man's dog, who knew the enemy before anyone else, had already made that choice clear. He growled toward the mountains ahead and walked forward, leading the way.